What if I told you there was a new technology that, when placed in the hands of doctors and nurses, improved outcomes for children and adults, patients of all ages, reduced pain and suffering, reduced time in the operating rooms, reduced anesthetic times, had the ultimate dose response curve that the more you did it, the better it benefited patients? Here's a kicker: it has no side effects, and it's available no matter where care is delivered. I can tell you, as an ICU doctor at Boston Children's Hospital, this would be a game changer for me. That technology is lifelike rehearsal. This lifelike rehearsal is being delivered through medical simulation. I thought I would start with a case, just to really describe the challenge ahead and why this technology is not just going to improve healthcare, but why it's critical to healthcare. This is a child that's born, young girl, day of life 0, we call it, the first day of life, just born into the world. And just as she's being born, we notice very quickly that she is deteriorating. Is displayed in this chest x-ray. And you can see how there's sort of that translucent area that's made its way up into the right side of this child's chest. And that are the intestines in the wrong place. And I work with surgical teams, and we gather around her, and we place this child on heart-lung bypass. We put her to sleep. We make a tiny little incision in the neck. We place catheters into the major vessels of the neck, and I can tell you that these vessels are about the size of a pen, the tip of a pen. And then we have blood drawn from the body, we bring it through a machine, it gets oxygenated, and it goes back into the body. And we save her life and get her safely to the operating room. To get the volume, the natural volume of these patients in order to get our expertise curve at 100%. In the healthcare system that I trained for over 20 years, what currently exists, the model of training is called the apprenticeship model. It's been around for centuries. It's based on this idea that you see a surgery maybe once, maybe several times. You then go do that surgery. And then ultimately you teach that surgery to the next generation. And implicit in this model, I don't need to tell you this, is that we practice on the very patients that we are delivering care to. That's a problem. And I think there's a better approach. Medicine may very well be the last high-stakes industry that does not practice prior to game time. We all get on planes now comforted by the idea that pilots and crews have trained on simulators much like these. And I guess the most compelling for me in some ways is the sports industry. Arguably high stakes. You think about how a baseball team, baseball players practice. I think it's a beautiful example of progressive training. The first thing they do is they go out to spring training. They go to a spring training camp, perhaps a simulator in baseball. They're not on the real field, but they're on a simulated field, and they're playing in the pre-game season. Then they make their way to the field during the season games, and what's the first thing they do before they start the game? They go into the batting cage, and they do batting practice for hours, having different types of pitches being thrown at them, hitting ball after ball as they limber their muscles, getting ready for the game itself. And here's the most phenomenal part of this. And for all of you who watch any sport event, you will see this phenomena happen. The batter gets into the batter's box. The pitcher gets ready to pitch. Right before the pitch is thrown, what does that batter do? The batter steps out of the box and takes a practice swing. He wouldn't do it any other way. I want to talk to you about how we're building practice swings like this in medicine. We have building batting cages for the patients that we care about at Boston Children's. I want to use this case that we recently built. It's a case of a 4-year-old who had a progressively enlarging head and as a result had loss of developmental milestones, neurologic milestones. And the reason for this problem is here. It's called hydrocephalus. So the cure for this is surgery. But some great news is that Advances in neurosurgical cares have allowed us to develop minimally invasive approaches to this surgery. So through a small pinhole, a camera can be inserted, led into the deep brain structure, and cause a little hole in a membrane that allows all that fluid to drain, much like it would be in a sink. And all of a sudden now, the brain is no longer under pressure, can re-expand, and we cure the child through a single hole incision. But here's the problem. Hydrocephalus is relatively rare. And there are no good training methods to get really good at getting this scope to the right place. But surgeons have been quite creative about this, even our own, and they've come up with training models. Here's the current training model. I kid you not. This is a red pepper, not made in Hollywood. It's a real red pepper. And what surgeons do is they stick a scope into the pepper and they do what is called a seedectomy. They use this scope to remove seeds using a little tweezer. And that is a way to get under their belts the rudimentary components of doing this surgery. And then they head right into the apprenticeship model, seeing many of them as they present themselves, then doing it, and then teaching it, waiting for these patients to arrive. And so surgeons can now produce training opportunities, do these surgeries as many times as they want, until their heart's content, until they feel comfortable, and then and only then bring the child into the operating room. But we don't stop here. We know that a key step to this is not just the skill itself, but combining that skill with a team who's going to deliver that care. And so now we turn to Formula One. And here's an example of a technician putting a tire and doing that time and time again on this car. But that is very quickly going to be incorporated within team training experiences, now as a full team, orchestrating the exchange of tires and getting this car back on the speedway. And so we've done that step. Operative teams are doing the surgery before the surgery. Operate twice, cut once. Lifelike rehearsal, practicing prior to game time. Thank you.